In the heart of downtown Manhattan, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury was a way of life, a woman named Amara stepped out of her sleek black car. She was dressed to impress. Her navy blue suit hugged her frame perfectly, paired with gold accessories that caught the light just right. Amara wasn't your average guest at the Grand Royale Hotel. She was a self-made millionaire and the CEO of a tech empire worth billions. Her company had booked this hotel months in advance for an important retreat, a celebration of their team's hard work and innovation. As soon as Amara entered the grand lobby of the Grand Royale, all eyes seemed to turn toward her. The space was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, and the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume. It was the kind of place where power brokers closed deals and celebrities escaped. Paparazzi. But despite its beauty, something felt off about how people reacted to her presence. The concierge greeted her politely, but hesitated when handing over the keycard to the VIP lounge. "Are you sure this is for you?" he asked, glancing at his clipboard again as though doubting what he saw there. Amara raised an eyebrow, slightly annoyed but not entirely surprised. This wasn't the first time someone underestimated her because of the color of her skin or her gender. Still, she smiled tightly and nodded, taking the card without saying much. Walking into the VIP lounge, Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, a quiet corner away from prying eyes. The room was everything she expected. Plush leather, chairs, panoramic views of the city skyline, and a bar stocked with premium drinks. She settled into one of the chairs, letting herself relax for the first time that day. For a moment, it felt like things were going smoothly. But then, trouble walked in. A tall man in his late 50s strode into the lounge, looking around as if he owned the place. He wore an expensive watch on his wrist and carried himself with an air of entitlement. Without even acknowledging Amara, he approached the staff member stationed near the door. "Excuse me," he said loudly, his voice dripping with authority. "I believe this is my reservation." Amara froze. Surely they wouldn't question her booking after she'd already been seated. Yet within moments, the same staff member who had handed her the keycard earlier appeared beside her chair. "Ma'am," he began awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. "We seem to have made a mistake. This spot has been reserved by, He gestured vaguely toward the man now standing impatiently nearby. Amara's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone and showed him the confirmation email, one she'd received weeks ago. "This is my reservation," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. But instead of backing down, the staff member shifted uncomfortably. "I understand, ma'am, but perhaps you could use another area. We'll make sure it's equally comfortable." It wasn't a request. It was a demand disguised as politeness. And worse, the man waiting watched the whole exchange with a smug expression, clearly enjoying the drama unfolding before him. Amara realized then that this wasn't just about a mix-up in reservations. It was deeper than that. Despite her accomplishments, her wealth and her status, she was being treated as though she didn't belong here. For a brief second, anger flared inside her chest. She wanted to argue, to call them out for their blatant bias. But years of navigating corporate America had taught her patience and strategy. So she stood up silently, gathered her things, and left the lounge without another word. As she walked away, she could feel the weight of the man's victorious gaze boring into her back. Once outside the lounge, Amara paused for a moment, leaning against the wall. Humiliation burned in her throat, but beneath it lay something stronger: determination. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every black woman who had ever been told she didn't deserve a seat at the table. It was about proving that no amount of money or success could shield you from prejudice, but also that prejudice didn't define your worth. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her assistant, checking in to see how the arrival went. Amara stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back, "Change of plans. Meet me in my suite in 10 minutes. By the time her assistant arrived, Amara had already formulated a plan. One phone call. Later, the wheels of justice would begin turning. and nothing would ever be the same again. Amara sat on the edge of her luxurious hotel suite bed, her mind racing like a storm. The plush surroundings did little to calm her. Expensive linens, gold accents, and a view of the city skyline couldn't distract her from the fire burning inside her chest. She replayed the scene in the VIP lounge over and over again, each memory fueling her anger. This wasn't just about being asked to leave a room. It was about being dismissed, disrespected, and devalued because of who she was. Her assistant walked in, balancing a tray with 2 cups of coffee. Setting it down on the table, she took one look at Amara's face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked cautiously, handing Amara a cup. Amara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but steady. "They kicked me out of the VIP lounge," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "For a white man." The assistant froze, her eyes widening. "What? But you had the reservation. You showed them proof." "Exactly," Amara replied, her tone sharp now. "Proof didn't matter. They saw me and decided I wasn't the right fit." She set the coffee cup down with more force than intended, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Do you know what that feels like? To work your entire life, to build something so big that people can't ignore it, and still have someone look at you and think you don't belong." The assistant didn't respond immediately. She knew better than to interrupt when Amara was in this kind of mood. Instead, she sat quietly, letting her boss vent. Amara continued, pacing back and forth across the suite. "It's not even about the room. It's about what it represents. It's about being told yet again that no matter how much money I make or how many awards I win, I'll always be seen as less than. And do you know why? Because I'm black." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly composed herself. Vulnerability wasn't something Amara allowed often, not in front of others anyway. She stopped pacing and turned to face her assistant. "But here's the thing. I'm done playing nice. I've spent years biting my tongue, smiling through the microaggressions and proving myself over and over again. Not this time. This ends now." The assistant nodded slowly, understanding dawning on her face. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. Amara reached for her phone, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen. "I'm calling Victor." Victor wasn't just any businessman. He was a billionaire real estate mogul whose family owned shares in the Grand Royale chain. More importantly, he owed Amara a favor, one that went way back. Years ago, when Victor's company faced a scandal that threatened to ruin his reputation, Amara had stepped in with a solution that saved him millions. Since then, they'd maintained a professional relationship, though Amara rarely called on him unless absolutely necessary. The phone rang twice before Victor picked up. "Amara," he said warmly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "It's me," she replied coolly, cutting straight to the point. "I need your help shutting down the Grand Royale." There was a brief pause on the other end. When Victor spoke again, his tone was serious. "What happened?" She explained everything. The reservation mix-up, the blatant discrimination, the staff choosing to side with a stranger instead of honoring her booking. By the time she finished, Victor was silent for a moment. Then he let out a low whistle. "That's messed up," he said finally. "Consider it done." Amara hung up the phone and leaned back against the headboard, her mind already racing with possibilities. Shutting down the hotel wouldn't be easy. It would take strategy, resources, and connections. But if anyone could pull it off, it was her. Over the next hour, she and her assistant mapped out a plan. First, they would gather evidence, emails, confirming her reservation, witness statements from employees who had been present during the incident, and even security footage if possible. Next, they would involve the media. A story like this would spread like wildfire, especially given Amara's prominence in the tech world. As they worked, Amara felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For once, she wasn't angry. Not really. Anger had given way to focus, to purpose. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message. If the Grand Royale thought they could treat her this way, then they deserved to face the consequences. And if other businesses were watching, all the better. Let them see what happens when you underestimate a black woman. By midnight, the groundwork was laid. Amara sent out a series of carefully worded emails to key players in her network: lawyers specializing in civil rights cases, journalists known for covering corporate scandals, and influential figures who could amplify her story. Each email ended with the same line: "Let's make sure this never happens again." As she powered down her laptop, Amara glanced at her reflection in the mirror. Her expression was unreadable, part determination, part exhaustion. Tomorrow would be a long day, but she was ready. The Grand Royale had underestimated her once. They wouldn't get the chance to do it again. The next morning, the Grand Royale Hotel woke up to a storm that would soon spiral far beyond anything its management could have anticipated. Amara's carefully orchestrated plan began unfolding like clockwork, and within hours, the hotel found itself at the center of a whirlwind it couldn't control. It started with the legal threats. Early that day, a team of high-powered lawyers descended on the hotel's corporate offices, armed with cease and desist letters accusing the establishment of racial discrimination. These weren't just any lawyers. Amara had handpicked some of the best in the business, people who specialized in civil rights cases and corporate accountability. The tone of the letters was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a warning. If the hotel didn't address the issue immediately, they would face lawsuits that could cripple them financially. But the legal pressure was only the beginning. Simultaneously, Amara reached out to her network of influential allies, business leaders, celebrities, and philanthropists who frequented the Grand Royale. One by one, she shared her story, not as a plea for sympathy, but as a call to action. Many of these individuals were shocked by what they heard. Some had experienced similar treatment themselves, while others simply couldn't believe such blatant discrimination still existed in 2023. Regardless of their personal experiences, they all agreed on one thing: something needed to be done. Among those who received Amara's message was Victor Langston, the billionaire real estate mogul whose family owned shares in the Grand Royale chain. When he got wind of the situation, his reaction was immediate and explosive. To him, this wasn't just about justice for Amara. It was about protecting his brand. The Grand Royale was supposed to represent luxury, exclusivity, and sophistication. An incident like this didn't just tarnish its reputation, it threatened to destroy it entirely. Victor wasted no time. He called an emergency meeting with the hotel's board of directors, demanding answers. How could this happen? He barked into the phone during one particularly heated exchange. Do you realize how much damage this is doing? People are canceling reservations left and right. Investors are pulling out. Do you even understand the magnitude of this mess? Meanwhile, Amara took to social media, a platform she rarely used personally but understood the power of. She posted a cryptic message that sent ripples through the internet. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. Actions speak louder than words. The post was accompanied by a photo of the Grand Royale's iconic facade, bathed in golden sunlight. It didn't take long for her followers to connect the dots. Within minutes, hashtags like Justice for Amara and Xiaoan Shutdown, the Royale began trending worldwide. Journalists scrambled to uncover the full story. News outlets picked up on the controversy, running headlines that painted the hotel in an increasingly negative light. Protesters gathered outside the building, holding signs that read, "Black excellence deserves respect," and "No justice, no business." Social media influencers joined the conversation, sharing videos and posts that amplified Amara's message. Even everyday customers weighed in, flooding review sites with scathing comments about their own experiences of bias and mistreatment at the hands of the hotel staff. Inside the Grand Royale, chaos reigned. Employees rushed around trying to contain the fallout, answering angry calls from guests and fielding complaints from sponsors who were reconsidering their partnerships. Managers held frantic meetings debating how to salvage the situation. Some suggested firing the staff members involved in the incident, hoping that a public sacrifice would appease critics. Others proposed launching a massive PR campaign to highlight the hotel's commitment to diversity and inclusion. But none of it seemed sufficient to quell the growing outrage. As the days passed, the financial impact became undeniable. Room bookings plummeted, event cancellations piled up, and revenue dropped to an all-time low. Major sponsors, including luxury brands and travel agencies, severed ties with the hotel chain. Even longtime loyalists distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with a company embroiled in such controversy. Behind closed doors, executives argued fiercely about how to move forward. Some pushed for drastic measures, like closing the flagship location temporarily to avoid further backlash. Others insisted on doubling down with marketing campaigns aimed at restoring trust. But deep down, everyone knew the damage was done. For Amara, watching the unraveling from afar was both satisfying and sobering. On one hand, she felt a sense of vindication knowing that her actions had sparked a reckoning. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the broader implications of what was happening. This wasn't just about punishing one hotel, it was about exposing systemic issues that affected countless people every single day. Discrimination wasn't limited to the Grand Royale. It was woven into the fabric of society, manifesting in subtle and overt ways across industries. Her assistant noticed the shift in her demeanor. "You okay?" she asked gently one evening as they reviewed updates from the legal team. Amara sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me feels like we're making progress. But another part wonders, if it's enough, what happens after this blows over? Will anything really change?" Her assistant hesitated before responding. "Maybe not overnight, but this is a start. You've shown people that they can fight back and win." That night, as Amara scrolled through the endless stream of news articles and social media posts, she allowed herself a small smile. The battle wasn't over, but she had struck a blow against a system that had tried to silence her. And in doing so, she had ignited a movement that showed no signs of slowing down. By the end of the week, the Grand Royale Hotel had become a name synonymous with controversy. The once prestigious establishment was now fighting for its survival as the scandal dominated headlines and social media feeds around the world. For Amara, watching the fallout unfold felt surreal. She had set the wheels in motion, but even she hadn't anticipated just how quickly the situation would spiral out of control. The hotel's management tried desperately to regain control of the narrative. They issued public apologies almost daily, each one more elaborate than the last. In one statement, they claimed that the incident was an isolated mistake caused by miscommunication. Another promised sweeping reforms, including mandatory diversity training for all staff members. Yet another pledged millions toward community initiatives aimed at promoting racial equality. But no matter what they said or did, it seemed like nothing could quell the growing outrage. Amara watched these attempts from a distance, her expression unreadable. She knew better than anyone that apologies without action were meaningless. These weren't just empty words. They were damage control tactics designed to protect their bottom line. And while some critics accused her of being too harsh, Amara remained unshaken. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. If the Grand Royale wanted to survive this storm, they would have to do more than issue hollow promises. They would need to prove they were willing to change. Behind closed doors, the boardroom of the Grand Royale chain was a war zone. Executives argued fiercely over how to handle the crisis, their voices rising in frustration. Some pushed for drastic measures, like shutting down the flagship location temporarily to avoid further backlash. Others insisted on launching a massive PR campaign to restore trust. A few even suggested cutting ties with certain investors who had publicly criticized the company. The tension was palpable, and tempers flared as everyone scrambled to find a solution. One particularly heated meeting ended with Victor Langston slamming his fist on the table. "We're losing everything," he shouted, his face red with anger. "Sponsors are pulling out, customers are canceling reservations, and our stock value is plummeting. If we don't fix this soon, there won't be anything left to save," his ear. Words hung heavy in the air, silencing the room. Everyone knew he was right. The financial toll was staggering. Revenue had dropped by nearly 70% in just a few days. Major sponsors, including luxury brands and travel agencies, had severed ties with the hotel chain. Even longtime loyalists distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with a company embroiled in such controversy. It was clear that if something drastic wasn't done, the entire chain could collapse under the weight of the scandal. As the chaos unfolded within the hotel's walls, outside pressure continued to mount. Protesters gathered daily outside the building, holding signs and chanting slogans that echoed through the streets. Social media influencers amplified the message, sharing videos and posts that kept the story alive in the public consciousness. Journalists dug deeper into the hotel's history, uncovering past incidents of alleged discrimination that painted an even darker picture of the institution. For many people, this wasn't just about Amara, it was personal. Countless guests came forward with their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of the hotel staff. One woman recounted being ignored by concierge workers, despite repeatedly asking for assistance. Another described being mistaken for a housekeeper, simply because of her race. Each story added fuel to the fire, turning what had started as an isolated incident into a symbol of systemic injustice. Amara followed these developments closely. Reading every article and watching every video, she felt a mix of emotions: anger at the patterns of behavior exposed, pride in the courage of those speaking up, and sadness at the realization of how widespread the problem truly was. Her assistant noticed her mood shifting and gently asked if she needed a break. "I'm fine," Amara replied, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. "It's just overwhelming. I didn't realize how many people this affects." Her assistant nodded knowingly. "You've given them a platform," she said softly. "Now it's up to us to make sure their voices are heard." That night, Amara sat alone in her suite, staring out at the city skyline. The lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the darkness she felt inside. Despite the progress being made, she couldn't shake the feeling that this fight was far from over. Yes, the Grand Royale was crumbling under the weight of its own mistakes. But what about everywhere else? What about the countless other institutions where discrimination thrived unchecked? She picked up her phone and scrolled through messages from supporters around the world. Strangers thanked her for standing up, for giving them hope that change was possible. Others shared their own experiences, seeking advice on how to navigate similar situations. Reading these messages brought tears to her eyes, not because of sadness, but because of solidarity. She wasn't alone in this fight. There were others who understood, who supported her, who believed in the power of justice. With renewed determination, Amara began drafting plans for the next phase of her campaign. Shutting down the Grand Royale was only the beginning. What came next would be bigger. A movement aimed at dismantling systemic racism in corporate spaces once and for all. She envisioned a foundation that would provide resources and mentorship programs for underrepresented entrepreneurs, helping them navigate industries riddled with bias. She imagined partnerships with organizations dedicated to equity and inclusion, creating a network of support for marginalized communities. Most importantly, she saw a future where no one would ever feel small or unworthy because of who they were. As dawn broke over the city, Amara leaned back in her chair, a sense of purpose settling over her. The battle against the Grand Royale had ignited something far greater than she'd ever imagined. It wasn't just about one hotel anymore. It was about rewriting the rules of a system that had failed so many. And as long as she had breath in her body, she wouldn't stop until real change became a reality. Weeks had passed since the scandal first erupted, and the Grand Royale Hotel was unrecognizable from the gleaming institution it once was. The flagship location, the very building where Amara had been humiliated, was now officially closed. Its grand doors locked shut and its windows dark. A sign outside read, "Temporarily closed for renovation." But everyone knew the truth. This wasn't about renovations, it was about survival. Inside the company's headquarters, executives were scrambling to pick up the pieces of what remained. The board had fired several top-level managers, including the concierge supervisor, who had sided with the white man over Amara. They issued yet another apology, this time accompanied by promises of sweeping reforms, mandatory diversity training, revised hiring practices and partnerships with advocacy groups. But these gestures felt hollow to many. Too little, too late. For Amara, watching the fallout unfold brought a mix of emotions. On one hand, she felt vindicated. Her actions had forced the hotel to confront its biases and exposed a pattern of behavior that couldn't be ignored. But on the other hand, she knew this wasn't just about punishing one establishment. It was about creating lasting change, a shift in how marginalized communities were treated in spaces meant for everyone. The media frenzy eventually died down, but not before sparking conversations far beyond the walls of the Grand Royale. People everywhere began sharing their own stories of discrimination, whether at hotels, restaurants, or workplaces. What started as a personal injustice against Amara had grown into something much larger, a movement demanding accountability and equity across industries. Amara didn't stop there. She used her platform to launch the Equity Initiative, a foundation dedicated to helping underrepresented entrepreneurs break through systemic barriers. The initiative provided mentorship, programs, funding opportunities, and workshops designed to equip aspiring business leaders with the tools they needed to succeed. It also partnered with schools and community organizations to inspire young people to dream big and aim high, regardless of their background. One of the first events hosted by the foundation was a panel discussion featuring trailblazers from various fields: tech, fashion, entertainment, and more. Each speaker shared their journey, highlighting moments when they faced bias or exclusion and how they overcame those challenges. Amara herself took the stage last, her presence commanding attention. Even before she spoke, "I've been where you are," she began, her voice steady but warm. "I've walked into rooms where people doubted me before I even opened my mouth. I've worked twice as hard to prove myself, only to be told I still wasn't enough. And yes, I've been asked to leave places because someone else decided I didn't belong." A murmur rippled through the audience, some nodding in agreement while others wiped away tears. Amara paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. "But here's the thing. We don't have to accept that. We don't have to stay silent or shrink ourselves to fit into spaces that weren't built for us. Instead, we can rise, and we can bring others with us." Her speech earned a standing ovation, and videos of it went viral online. For days afterward, strangers reached out to thank her, not just for her message but for giving them hope. Many said they finally felt seen and heard, like their struggles mattered. Others pledged to support the foundation, donating money or volunteering their time to help further its mission. Meanwhile, the Grand Royale chain struggled to rebuild its image. Though they reopened the flagship location months later, attendance remained low. Customers avoided the brand altogether, opting for competitors instead. Investors continued to distance themselves, wary of associating with a company mired in controversy. Some speculated that the entire chain might collapse entirely within the next year. But for Amara, the closure of the Grand Royale wasn't the end goal. It was a symbol. It represented what could happen when people refused to tolerate injustice, when they stood up and demanded better. She often thought back to that day in the VIP lounge, remembering the sting of humiliation and the anger that followed. Those feelings hadn't disappeared completely, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, they fueled her determination to create a world where such incidents wouldn't happen again, or at least wouldn't go unchallenged. Months later, during a press conference announcing new partnerships for the Equity Initiative, a reporter asked Amara if she regretted any part of what she'd done. Did she think she'd gone too far? Had she been too harsh? Amara smiled faintly, leaning toward the microphone. "Regret implies remorse," she said firmly. "And I don't feel remorse for standing up for myself, or for anyone else who's ever been made to feel small. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. It's about showing people that they can rise above the systems designed to hold them back. If anyone thinks I went too far, then maybe they should ask themselves why they're comfortable staying silent." As she stepped away from the podium, flanked by supporters chanting her name, Amara felt a sense of peace wash over her. The fight wasn't over. She knew that all too well. Systemic racism wasn't something that could be dismantled overnight, but progress had been made, and she was proud of what she'd accomplished. More importantly, she was hopeful about what lay ahead. The Grand Royale may have fallen, but in its place stood a movement stronger than any empire. And Amara? She was just getting started.